So our last speaker now is Ms. Annie Hoey. She's Vice President for Equality and Citizenship in the Union of Students in Ireland. Thank you very much, Annie.
This evening we're here to debate the proposed constitutional amendment. Marriage may be contracted in accordance with law by two persons without distinction as to their sex. And as the previous speakers on the yes side have already laid the arguments out very clearly for you. But firstly, let me share something with you that I did not think I was going to bring up this evening. I want to talk about the experiences of those of us who are out on this campaign and the freedom of conscience we talk about. At a person's door, where I was going around begging for my human right to have my love recognised, I have been spat on. Growing up, I have been punched, shoved and kicked for being different. In school, I lived a life of terror, knowing that society said I was wrong. My love and sexual orientation is not for your freedom of conscience to discriminate against. Changing the Constitution to recognise same-sex unions will not put an end to homophobia and discrimination, but it will be a huge step forward. And the LGBT youth of today may revel in the idea that their country recognises them, who they love and who they are. But I'm not going to dwell too much on my sub-story because that's not really what we're here to talk about. Marriage is a unique legal status conferred by and recognised by governments the world over. It brings with it a host of reciprocal obligations, rights and protections. Yet it is more than its sum of its legal parts. It's also a cultural institution. The word itself is a fundamental protection, conveying clearly that you and your life partner love each other. It represents the ultimate expression of love and commitment between two people, and everyone understands that. No other word has that power, and no other word can provide that protection. In Ireland, the family, with or without children, based in marriage, is protected in the Constitution from attack and must be guarded with special care. This means that other families, with or without children, do not have this special, elevated status in Irish law. Marriage equality is sweeping across the United States, Argentina and New Zealand, where, by the way, when marriage equality passed in the Parliament of New Zealand, it was met with applause and members of the Parliament stood up to sing a Maori love song, Pokarina Anna, and it was an incredibly beautiful moment. And from what I can see, marriage equality has not yet brought down the Southern Pacific economy, affected the marriages of any straight couples in California, or caused families to break down due to the disintegration of family values in Argentina. In fact, I believe this development has been a glimmer of good news amid a period in our history which has been clouded by economic decline and political unrest. One of the most common arguments used against marriage equality is the claim that it diminishes and devalues traditional matrimony and family life. But here's the thing. We've never had traditional marriages, not least in the way you would think of them. For instance, the historian Deirdre McCulloch pointed out in the 14th century, marriage consisted of two people making a verbal agreement to be committed to each other. All that was needed was for both parties to say, "I marry you," and that was it. Every cut and trimming that we currently associate with marriage, white dress, vows, cakes and witnesses, developed due to social, political and economic changes. Marriage has evolved dramatically in the past 100 years and continues to do so. Only 60 years ago, interracial marriages were illegal in most parts of the world. Many of the arguments used to justify their illegality, such as reference to the Bible or other religious texts, are currently being employed by many against marriage equality. Then, as now, there existed the idea that these marriages would be a major disruption to traditional family values and would create family units that would ultimately damage the children inside them. We have constantly been redefining what it means to be in a marriage. Up until the 1970s, a woman, once married, was considered as living in her husband's domicile, regardless of whether she actually was or not, as she had to give up her job in the civil service after getting married. And up until the Rape Amendment Act in 1990, a man was not considered able to rape his wife. Whether you like it or not, all these changes for the good I might add, have been a part of redefining what it means to be married. Let me briefly mention children. As a previous speaker stated, there is no evidence to say that children of same-sex couples are of any disadvantage as compared to children of opposite-sex couples. Those of opposed same-sex marriage also raise the issue of adoption by same-sex couples. And as previously stated, history has shown us plenty of examples where, due to religious, racial, and now gender bias, certain combinations of a person in a marriage were considered substandard or even harmful to the children involved. Many of these family units are now accepted in society without a bat of an eyelid. No one can deny that adoption is a long, arduous process, and every case has to be reviewed by multiple personnel before a child is given a new home. With both straight and same-sex couples hoping to adopt, they have to be carefully selected with the child's best interest in mind. And I've never heard of a child saying, yep, I'd much rather bounce from various foster home to foster home rather than having a loving and a stable family life. Children of same-sex couples will continue to exist after May 22nd. The only difference will be that these children will have been told by their country that their family is not right. A claim regularly made in the marriage equality referendum debate is that civil partnership should be sufficient to same-sex couples, as there's no need to extend marriage to same-sex couples. But I have to refute this argument. Civil partnership certainly provides extensive rights and obligations. It offers equal treatment with marriage for existence in the context of taxation, social welfare, pensions, citizenship, immigration, property, domestic violence and maintenance. Largely equal treatment applies in the context of succession and the remedy following dissolution. It delivered a number of vitally important and in some cases urgently needed protections for same-sex couples. But civil partnership differs from marriage in a number of respects. Many of these differences initially related to children being raised by civil partners, although many of these have been eliminated through the Child and Family Relationships Bill. But some of the distance includes things like constitutional protection. Civil partnership does not attract the protection that the Constitution gives to marriage. In particular, civil partners are not a family for the purpose of the Constitution. The specific right of autonomy, freedom from state interference afforded to spouses by Article 41 does not apply to a family made up of civil partners. Civil partners and their children are not a family for the purpose of the Constitution. For children being raised by civil partners, the protection of the family provisions of the Constitution is thus denied permanently. Different names are used for the home in which civil partners lived. It's called a shared home instead of the phrase a family home, which normally applies to two spouses' home. It is also easier to exit a civil partnership than a marriage. With marriage, couples have to be living apart for 4 of the previous 5 years to divorce. By contrast, with civil partnership dissolution, the partners have to live apart for 2 out of the previous 3 years. The rules relating to the recognition of foreign dissolutions of civil partnerships are also vastly different, and so on and so forth. So the idea that civil partnership is equal and has the same rights as civil marriage is clearly bogus. Let me remind you exactly what we're voting on. Marriage may be contracted in accordance with the law by 2 persons without distinction as to their sex. Voting yes this Friday will not change the definition of marriage. It will not afford same-sex couples elevated status over opposite-sex couples in terms of adoption, and surrogacy will be legislated for separately. The truth is, marriage is an intensely personal ordeal, good Lord. They are defined not by the courts or by our votes, but by the people that live inside them. That's traditional marriage, people making daily, lifelong commitments to each other. Same-sex marriage is already happening. In fact, it has been happening for as long as human beings have been pledging themselves to each other. What we now must decide on, as a country, is whether or not we recognise these same-sex unions as equal in the eyes of the law. Please, on May 22nd, it is indeed okay to vote yes to marriage equality. Thank you.